What have you found then on this?
No, it's really fascinating story. Obviously, the Leicestershire Police and Crime Commissioner to Conservative, Rupert Matthews, seems to have kind of reignited this debate around BLM. But obviously, last year that was quite central to the conversation. Essentially imported the narrative from the US about police brutality and police violence, particularly around ethnic minority communities. And in the last few days, I've essentially been looking into some of the relationships between the police and Black Lives Matter and how it really impacted it. So I actually spoke to the Metropolitan Police, and one of the things, particularly at the end of last year, they argued that they were going to double the number of ethnic minority recruits, particularly in response to the BLM protest. But a lot of things that they've said that they're going to be doing in order to improve relations. One of the things they've said, they're going to have a new anonymous listening survey to help communities understand what the police are doing, so they can actually be involved when they're actually on the beat to really see what policing is actually like. They're going to bring in an independent advisory group member in order to, again, understand the complex, challenging situations that police officers face in their job, introducing body cams and things like that, involving much more activist groups and advisory groups in order to actually expand the number of organisations that the police are engaging with. But funnily enough, it's quite interesting. Obviously, that's positive things that the police are doing in response, but there's also been a lot of criticism of how BLM have actually acted towards the police. So that commissioner mentioned the fact that actually the BLM protest led to a lot of police officers being in hospital. And actually a few months ago, the Telegraph effectively reported that there was quite a significant spike in police officers being assaulted, particularly black police officers experiencing racial abuse, often by Black Lives Matter protesters during those protests as well. So I think that the relations still seem to be quite tense between that organisation and the police.
On that then, what do you think the police can do to improve relations sort of with ethnic minority groups? I mean, that clearly, as you said, is a big problem. What can they do and what are they going to do we think?
Well, it's interesting because I spoke to a former Met police officer called Chris Donaldson, and he's very sceptical of a lot of the moves that the police force are doing in order to kind of so-called improve relations. He doesn't believe that the police are institutionally racist. He argues that actually a lot of the anti-police narratives, the police are reluctant to challenge them and are allowing a lot of these narratives about the police being racist and targeting of ethnic minority communities to shape the public conversation and not confident enough to challenge it. And he argues that if you want to attract diverse police forces, what you really need to do is actually appeal to them based on their same instinct. Don't treat them as aliens, that's the phrase that he used, and actually appeal to them based on the fact that, you know, it's a good salary, you get to have a challenging and diverse environment, and these are the things that kind of transcend a lot of these racial ideas, and the police should be focusing on that and not necessarily putting out fires when it comes to activists making smearing statements about the police.
Interesting, isn't it, that obviously, I would say, unlike in the United States, we kind of police by consent in this country. You know, most police officers are not armed. There's a kind of, you know, there's a general, relatively high level of trust between communities and the police. How important do you think it is that police forces, though, do reflect their communities, you know, particularly in big cities like London and Manchester, indeed elsewhere? Is that important? Is it important that essentially police officers look like the communities that they police?
It's interesting because I also spoke to a social cohesion and institutional trust expert, Dr. Rakib Ahsan, and he mentioned that actually a police and crime survey and also a poll done by YouGov found that actually ethnic minority communities, contrary to popular discourse, actually have higher levels. Often some ethnic minority communities have higher levels than the general population when it comes to trust in British police, and they overall do believe that it is a force for good. So oftentimes we have this narrative that unless it represents certain communities exactly, that somehow means that they're not connecting to those communities. I think that all people, regardless of background, want the police to be able to do a good job. They want them to essentially be honest and genuine and be able to respond quickly. Those are the primary reasons why people support a police force. It's not necessarily that it reflects them racially or gender-wise. Obviously, it's completely legitimate in a city like London, for example, that is about 50% ethnic minority, that you would want a police force that you feel might reflect people that came from your area or understand your concerns. But I think the nature of policing has incredibly changed. Community policing is not as strong as it was before. Oftentimes police are drafted in from many different areas. So whether or not it's actually realistic to be able to do that is a question. I think that if they're setting unrealistic targets and then failing them a few months later, then that could perhaps cause more problems in the long term.
Yeah.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.